Hello and welcome in. My name is Mark, aka the Markster. This is video number 4 in the FreeCAD series. In the last video, we made a wagon wheel using a polar array from the draft workbench. That same array tool can be used to make rectangular arrays. We'll demonstrate that today by making this pegboard. Let's go ahead and close this. We'll create a new document. And as usual, the first thing we'll do is we'll go to the spreadsheet menu, create a new spreadsheet. I'm going to relabel this, rename it SS, save some typing later on. And here we will define our variables. So a pegboard will have a certain width, a certain height, and a certain thickness. It will have a certain distance between the holes, a certain radius for the holes. So we'll define those variables here. SS underscore board width. That'll be our first variable. Board height. Our board thickness. I'm going to move this out a little bit so we can see the full names better. And we'll need our hole radius. The x interval is the distance in the x direction, center to center, from one hole to the next. And the y interval would be up and down instead of left and right. And I think that's all we need. To define our pegboard. We'll go back to the part workbench, and we need to create aliases for these variables. I showed how to do that in video number 1, and in video number 2, I think it was, we showed how to download and install a macro called Easy Alias to make this easier. But to recap, right click the cell where we're going to place our values, choose Properties, choose the Alias tab, enter the alias to use for that cell. And if we mouse over it, we get a tooltip showing us the name of the alias. It has a yellow background to indicate there is an alias. In the Tools menu, we can go to the Add-on Manager to install the Easy Alias macro. Select the Macros tab, wait for it to populate. Look for Easy Alias. Choose Install Selected right here to install or update the macro. I've already done it. To use the macro, you highlight the cells that need an alias in the cell next to it. To the macro menu, macros. Look for the Easy Alias macro and choose Execute. Had some error here. Oh, I need to also select the spreadsheet. You might have multiple spreadsheets in your document, so that's why there's a requirement to select spreadsheet also. Macros, let's try this again. Easy alias, execute, and now it worked. The report view at the bottom gives you the error messages. This is very useful to have open, I find. In 0.19, the report view will automatically open on all error and warning messages. This can be disabled if you find it to be annoying, and you can do that. Go to the edit menu, preferences, output window, be in the general tab here on the left, output window, and right here where it says show report view on warning or error, you can disable that. But I don't want to do that. I'm going to clear this, right click menu, clear. That way if there's another error, it'll catch my attention. Let's save our document. And we'll call it pegboard. Let's insert our values now. I am in the United States. I have a pegboard outside in my shop, and I measured the distance. It was 1 inch between the holes, and the holes were about 3/8 inch diameter. The width of the board is 8 feet long. The height of the board is 4 feet. And the thickness is 1/4 inch. I don't want to make a full-size model here because they end up with so many holes. It slows down FreeCAD a little bit too much for making a video. When you create the array, or when you do the cut, it just takes too long for a video. So I'm going to make this board much smaller than the one outside. You can always come back and make it the right size. So I'm going to make it only 24 inches wide, or 2 feet. So 2 times 12 times 25.4. I'm in millimeters in my unit settings. I'm going to leave it in millimeters and just do the conversion here. There are 25.4 millimeters per inch, 12 inches per foot. Press enter there. And the height will be 1 foot only. So 1 times 12 times 25.4. And the thickness will be 1/4 inch. Note the parentheses. I always like to put my fractions in parentheses. So later on, if I decide to change that to something like 1 1/4, if I wanted to, I could just go in and edit that. And hole radius is 3/16 of an inch. The interval is 1 inch in both directions. And we'll save our file. We'll use a cube to represent the pegboard, and we'll resize it. Let's switch to the front view. And let's do the top view instead. It's going to confuse things a little bit. Imagine we're building it on the flat table, and then we'll rotate it and mount it on the wall. So the length is going to be actually the width here, I believe. And the width the height here, is that correct? Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. And the height is going to be the thickness equals ss.ss. This brings up our aliases in a list. Very convenient. And now we can see this is what we want. And now we need to make all the holes. We'll do that with the Boolean cut using the cylinder. We're going to array the cylinder into a rectangular array and do the cut. So the radius of the cylinder equals ss.ss whole radius, and the height, we could make it simply the height of the board, and that would work. The thickness of the board, I mean. But I want to make it 3 times that so that it sticks out a little bit above and below. And in order to achieve that, I need to move the cylinder down. So we'll change the placement position in the Z direction minus the amount of the board thickness equals board thickness times -1 to move it down. Press F5 to refresh, and we've achieved that. Now when you create a rectangular array, it begins at the lower left corner, it builds to the right, and it builds up. And I want to move this cylinder to somewhere right here where my mouse is at. So again, the placement and the position, we'll change the X position, press equals ss.ss, the X interval, press F5, and in the Y direction equals ss.ss, the Y interval, press F5 to refresh. And now we can go create our array in the draft workbench. Select the base object and click the toolbar icon. And now we have our array created, but of course it does not have the right interval or the right number to use or any of that, so we need to change those properties. It's already in ortho mode, which is the default. Recall we had to change this to polar before. So we want ortho for this mode. We can set our interval for the X. Click the FX icon, ss.ss, X interval, and the Y interval equals ss.ss, down arrow key, enter again, F5 to refresh. Now we need to set how many we need in the X direction, and in the Y direction currently 2 is the default. So if we roll the mouse wheel up, press F5, you can see what happens as I change these values. But we don't want to just set a number there because we want our model to be parametric, so that when we change the width and the height of the board, it'll create new holes for us automatically, the proper number of rows and columns. So we're going to use a little bit of math. We'll use the board width divided by the X interval, and that gives us one too many. So let's edit that, say -1, F5, that's more like it. Now the Y, we'll do the same thing. This is the board height divided by the Y interval, -1. F5 to refresh. And now we just need to cut with the Boolean Cut operation in the part workbench. So we switch back to part, select the base for the cut, which is our cube, holding down the control key. I am in Blender navigation mode. A different navigation mode might require a different key or a different method for multiple selection. Down here in the lower right corner, you can see I'm in Blender mode. You might be in a different mode. In a different mode might require a different means of selecting multiple objects. So if it doesn't work for you, that could be the issue. Right, and now we can do our Boolean cut right here from the toolbar. And you see that took a few seconds. A full-size board would take much longer. We have 23 times 11. We can enter in the Python console and see that that is 253 cut operations that had to be performed. If you make the board bigger, there will be more that you need to do, more cut operations. So for example, let's make it 2x3. I'm going to right click here and choose skip recomputes. So we'll change both of these values. 2x3, enter, and this one will be 3, and this one will be 2. And then let's turn off skip recomputes and recompute. And wait for it. And you can see with a 2x3 board, it took quite a bit longer to do it, and that's only 2 feet by 3. The one outside is 4 feet by 8 feet. So this is 35 times 23. 35 times 23. 800 operations that had to be performed. So the more you make, the longer it takes. Now let's imagine, I'm going to go back to the smaller size to make it just quicker to show the next thing I want to show you. 2 feet by 1 feet, 1 foot. Make that 2 feet. F5 to refresh. Turn off skip recomputes. And let's save our document. Okay. Now let's imagine that this is basically what we want, but for some reason we don't want a hole maybe right here in this corner. Doesn't really make sense for a pegboard, but you can imagine other models that you might make using a similar method where you don't want one or more of the items, one or more of the copies. So we can remove this by using the defeaturing tool. Click here, and this is remove a feature from a shape. Hopefully it won't take too awfully long. There it is. Of course, another way to do this would be to make another cylinder and use it as a plug for that hole. This defeatured object that is created is not parametric. So if we later went back and modified our spreadsheet, it would not be reflected, the changes would not be reflected in the defeatured object. So this is not parametric. I'm going to delete the defeatured object. Make the cut object visible again. And I'll show you a different way that we can do this. Select the array object and choose explode compound. Now we have an exploded array. Let's hide the cut. This is number 254, 252, excuse me. We can delete that. Select the cube, exploded array, make a cut. Compute failed. What we need to do is select them all and make a compound. Let me delete this cut and clear this error. Make the cut again. So now cut 1 does not have the hole that we did not want, but this one still does. The array object is a compound object. We haven't talked about compounds yet, but by exploding it, we made each of the copies of the cylinder accessible. You could also use this to move the holes around. For example, if you needed 2 holes that were, instead of 5 inches apart, maybe 5.5, you could move, instead of deleting the one I deleted, you could move it, remake the compound, and do the cut again. I'm sure we'll get into compounds a little bit more in later videos. This, I don't know if it's going to be parametric or not. I think it will be. Let's try this. Make it 2 feet by 2 feet. Somewhat parametric. It would need to be redone. It looks like it's not going to be fully parametric. But that's a general method. It's a general idea on how you can modify the individual elements of your array to get your desired result, more or less. If I wanted to make this all the way out, I would probably delete this cut, delete that compound, delete that exploded array, and do it again. Explode the compound. Let me hide that cut. Select the one I want to get rid of, or if I want to get rid of 2, Control select, delete them. I might as well move that one around like I was talking about. You see how it's not quite lined up perfectly anymore? This is our dragger tool. You can drag by hand. So once we have it placed where we want it, we'll go up here, we'll collapse this. We'll select them all. Let's do that. Shift in on the keyboard. Make a compound. Collapse that. Select the cube. Select the compound. Make the cut. Now we have our custom pegboard. The same trick can work with all the different arrays, the polar array as well. This can be useful if you have something in a polar pattern and you need to remove one of the objects in the pattern. Maybe you're making a part for something and there would be something in the way if you had one of the elements in the array in that location, or whatever reason you might have to customize some of the elements or some of the items in the array. Well, that's going to do it for today. Thank you for watching and have a great day.